When I became the Brooklyn Brawler, it was a re-debut, and I thought it was really exciting, especially being under the tutelage of the greatest manager, in my eyes, Bobby the Brain Heenan. It was like my first day in the WWE, and it was like being born again. It was really exciting. Well, the name the Brooklyn Brawler, I think it actually came up because I was born and raised in Brooklyn, New York. I think it was an idea of Bobby Heenan, if I remember correctly. He just thought I was a brawling type person, and he just took my background coming from Brooklyn, incorporated it into the Brooklyn Brawler. So I give credit to Bobby Heenan for coming up with the Brooklyn Brawler. I can remember my very first match as the Brooklyn Brawler. It was in Huntsville, Alabama, against a guy called Reno Riggins. That was his name. And I think I beat him to a pulp. I think I just came out there with the confidence from having Bobby Heenan next to me. It just gave me energy and a confidence that I'm a new man, and that there ain't a person who is going to take me. There's not a person that is going to beat me. And that confidence alone, I beat the hell out of Reno Riggins.
In our crazy world of professional wrestling, few characters have captured the hearts of fans with as much rugged charm and unintentional humor as the Brooklyn Brawler. Emerging from the gritty streets of New York's borough of Brooklyn, this wrestler's persona was never designed to be the main event star. Instead, he carved out a unique niche as the unsung hero of the squared circle, a scrappy underdog who, despite countless losses, became a beloved symbol of perseverance and authenticity. His character was a blend of old-school brawler toughness, streetwise bravado, and a self-deprecating wit that resonated with audiences both in the arena and at home. Over the years, the Brooklyn Brawler transcended his role as an enhancement talent to become a living testament to the art of storytelling in wrestling. His career, replete with moments that were both painfully humbling and unexpectedly hilarious, encapsulated the spirit of professional wrestling, a world where every bout, win or loss, contributed to an ever-evolving narrative. This video embarks on a journey through the life and legacy of the Brooklyn Brawler. We will delve into his early beginnings, the evolution of his persona, and the countless moments that defined his tenure in the WWE. Along the way, you will discover how his gritty determination, combined with a touch of lighthearted humor, transformed an ostensibly minor character into an enduring cultural icon. By examining archival matches, behind-the-scenes anecdotes, and the indelible mark he left on the industry, we aim to present a comprehensive portrait of a wrestler who, against all odds, became a cherished figure in the annals of sports entertainment. So join me as we step into the ring with the Brooklyn Brawler and explore the multifaceted legacy of a true blue-collar warrior in professional wrestling. Before the bright lights of the WWE marquee embraced him, the Brooklyn Brawler's journey began in the rough-and-tumble neighborhoods of Brooklyn, New York. In a city defined by its relentless hustle and unyielding spirit, our Brawler's formative years were steeped in the ethos of blue-collar resilience. Stories of his youth paint a picture of a scrappy kid who learned early on that life was a battle, a series of challenges to be met head-on with grit, and a smile that hid the hardships of the everyday grind. While the specifics of his early life remain partly shrouded in the mists of wrestling lore, it is widely accepted that his Brooklyn roots were integral to the persona he would later bring to life in the ring. As a young man, he dabbled in local wrestling circuits where the art of brawling was less about technical prowess and more about sheer tenacity and character. His early matches, often held in modest community centers and local arenas, were characterized by raw, unpolished action, a far cry from the grand spectacle of the WWE, but rich with authenticity. It was during these formative bouts that he learned the ropes of professional wrestling in a literal and figurative sense. The countless hours spent training in dimly lit gyms, grappling with seasoned veterans, and absorbing the nuances of showmanship set the stage for a career that would later captivate millions. Even in these early days, there was an unmistakable spark, a willingness to embrace every loss as a lesson, every defeat as a stepping stone toward personal growth. The Brooklyn Brawler's persona was not built on victories alone, but on the relentless spirit of never giving up. His approach resonated deeply with the working-class fans who saw in him a mirror of their own struggles and dreams. Even in these early days, there was an unmistakable spark, a willingness to embrace every loss as a lesson, every defeat as a stepping stone toward personal growth. The Brooklyn Brawler's persona was not built on victories alone, but on the relentless spirit of never giving up. His approach resonated deeply with the working-class fans who saw in him a mirror of their own struggles and dreams. Through his rugged appearance, unpretentious demeanor, and an ever-present hint of humor in the face of adversity, he established a connection that would prove to be the cornerstone of his enduring appeal. By the time the WWE began to take notice of his unique blend of tenacity and comic relief, the Brooklyn Brawler had already honed a persona that was as distinctive as it was endearing. Far from the flamboyant superstars who dominated the headlines, his character was a throwback to an earlier era, a time when wrestling was a gritty, no-nonsense contest of wills. Clad in attire that evoked the imagery of a street fighter more than a polished athlete, the Brooklyn Brawler embraced every aspect of his Brooklyn heritage. His rugged, unshaven look, mismatched gear, and a never-say-die attitude contributed to an image that was instantly recognizable and profoundly relatable. Within the WWE universe, where larger-than-life characters often battled in epic showdowns, his role was paradoxically humble. Tasked with the crucial duty of putting over the emerging stars, he became the quintessential enhancement talent, a role that required not only physical resilience, but also a deep understanding of narrative dynamics. Every time he stepped into the ring, his willingness to absorb punishment and lose with dignity allowed newer talents to shine. Yet, in doing so, he wove a subtle narrative of his own, a story of sacrifice, humility, and the art of knowing one's place in a grander tapestry of sports entertainment. The character was meticulously crafted to embody the spirit of the underdog. In interviews and behind-the-scenes segments, the Brooklyn Brawler was known for his quick wit and self-deprecating humor. He often joked about his endless string of losses, turning what many might consider a career shortfall into a badge of honor. "Every time I lose, I'm one step closer to making someone else a champion," he would quip, eliciting laughter and nods of approval from both colleagues and fans alike. This humor wasn't forced. It was a natural extension of his life's philosophy. His willingness to laugh at himself, even in the face of adversity, elevated him from a mere jobber to a beloved folk hero in the wrestling community. Stepping into the WWE ring, the Brooklyn Brawler found himself thrust into a world where the stakes were high, and the action was as unpredictable as it was thrilling. Though his record was punctuated by more losses than wins, his matches were never lackluster in their storytelling. One of the hallmarks of his in-ring career was his ability to make every bout, regardless of its outcome, a memorable spectacle. Each match was a carefully choreographed display of endurance, resilience, and an unspoken understanding of his role in the larger narrative of the show. Among the most notable of his encounters were bouts against some of the most flamboyant and skilled wrestlers of the era. In these matches, the Brooklyn Brawler was the perennial underdog, often facing opponents whose agility, strength, and charisma dazzled the audience. Yet, despite the mismatched dynamics, he held his own with a blend of scrappy tactics and raw determination. His signature moves, if one could call them moves, were less about technical wrestling and more about creating moments of humor and pathos. A well-timed stumble, a feigned injury, or even a humorous miscommunication with his opponent often elicited a cheer from the crowd, transforming what might have been a forgettable match into a cherished moment of wrestling folklore. In one memorable storyline, he found himself in a rivalry with a rising star whose arrogance was as inflated as his championship aspirations. The feud, built on the classic narrative of the underdog versus the unstoppable force, was punctuated by backstage interviews where the Brooklyn Brawler's dry humor shone through. "I may not have the muscles or the moves, but I've got heart, and a knack for turning a loss into a lesson," he would remark. The storyline resonated deeply with fans, who saw in it a reflection of their own struggles and the eternal hope that every setback was merely a precursor to eventual triumph. The matches were often interspersed with moments of levity, whether it was an impromptu dance-off after a particularly dramatic fall, or a tongue-in-cheek reference to his storied history in the business. These instances of humor not only lightened the mood, but also underscored the humanity of a character who, despite being scripted for defeat, never lost his spark. The Brooklyn Brawler's bouts were, in essence, a microcosm of professional wrestling itself, a blend of athleticism, theatrics, and storytelling that defied the rigid expectations of win-loss records. Behind the glare of the arena lights and the roar of the crowd lay a life that was as unglamorous as it was fascinating. The daily routine of the Brooklyn Brawler was marked by a mixture of disciplined training, spontaneous pranks, and a camaraderie that transcended the scripted rivalries in the ring. His mornings often began in a modest gym, where he would train with the same relentless energy that had defined his career. Despite the physical toll that years of in-ring battles had taken on his body, his determination remained unbroken. Colleagues recall how he would lace up his boots with a quiet determination, often sharing a laugh over the absurdity of his circumstances. After training, there was time for the rituals that made him a cult favorite among fans and fellow wrestlers alike. Whether it was a leisurely stroll through backstage corridors or an impromptu session of banter with the rookies, the Brooklyn Brawler's day was a blend of work and whimsical moments. One popular anecdote recounts how he once orchestrated a playful prank involving a pair of oversized boxing gloves, leaving his teammates in stitches as they discovered the unexpected accessory to his workout gear. These lighthearted moments served as a reminder that beneath the gruff exterior lay a man with a deep appreciation for the absurdities of life, a quality that endeared him to everyone he encountered. Beyond the physicality and the theatrics, there was a profound sense of community in his daily life. In locker rooms and dressing areas where tensions often ran high, the Brooklyn Brawler was known for his ability to diffuse conflicts with a well-timed joke or a sincere word of encouragement. His humble origins and unpretentious outlook on life provided a counterpoint to the ostentatious displays of bravado that were common in the industry. For many younger wrestlers, he was not just a jobber or a stepping stone to stardom. He was a mentor who demonstrated that success was not measured solely by championship belts, but by the respect earned through perseverance and kindness. This glimpse into a day in the life of the Brooklyn Brawler reveals a man who embraced the duality of his existence, the rough-and-tumble wrestler who lost countless matches, and the wise, affable mentor who celebrated every moment, win or lose, with equal fervor. The tapestry of the Brooklyn Brawler's career is interwoven with countless behind-the-scenes stories that have since become the stuff of wrestling lore. Among these are tales of his uncanny ability to diffuse high-tension moments with a perfectly timed quip or a spontaneously arranged pratfall that left even the most hardened veterans in stitches. In one particularly famous incident, during a live televised event, an unexpected mishap with the set led to a moment of unscripted chaos. While other wrestlers scrambled to regain composure, the Brooklyn Brawler, ever the consummate professional, turned the incident into an impromptu comedy act. With a deadpan expression and a wry remark about keeping the audience on their toes, he transformed what could have been a production disaster into a highlight reel moment that fans still recall fondly. These stories are emblematic of a broader truth about his career, that the measure of a wrestler is not solely in his win-loss record, but in the indomitable spirit with which he met every challenge. Colleagues often recounted his habit of leaving locker rooms with a final piece of advice. Remember, it ain't about the win, it's about the story you leave behind. This maxim encapsulated his entire approach to professional wrestling. In an industry where flash and triumph were often prized above all else, the Brooklyn Brawler's willingness to embrace his role as the perennial underdog lent an authenticity to every match he participated in. Even outside the ring, his interactions with fans were characterized by a refreshing blend of candor and humor. At fan conventions and autograph signings, he would regale audiences with tales of his early days, punctuating each story with self-mocking humor and a reminder that every bruise and every loss had been a stepping stone on a long, winding path. His willingness to poke fun at his own misfortunes endeared him to fans who appreciated the honest, unvarnished narrative of a man who had truly lived the highs and lows of the wrestling world. Over decades of service to the wrestling industry, the Brooklyn Brawler has transcended the confines of his scripted role to become a cultural icon, whose legacy is measured not in championship titles, but in the hearts he touched. His contributions to professional wrestling extend beyond his in-ring performances. They are woven into the very fabric of the industry's history. For many, he represents the quintessential working-class hero, a reminder that even in a business dominated by superstars and flashy gimmicks, there is honor and humility and dignity in defeat. His impact is evident in the stories shared by newer generations of wrestlers, many of whom credit him with teaching them the value of resilience, the importance of humor in adversity, and the art of storytelling in the ring. In locker rooms across the country, echoes of his advice, delivered with a wry smile and an infectious laugh, continue to inspire. The Brooklyn Brawler's legacy is not just that of a wrestler who took a hit and kept on going, but of a man who transformed every setback into a lesson in perseverance. Even as the wrestling landscape has evolved into a global spectacle with high production values and cutting-edge athleticism, the spirit of the Brooklyn Brawler endures. His presence is felt in every underdog story, every moment of raw determination, and every time a wrestler steps into the ring knowing that sometimes the true victory lies in the courage to keep fighting. His career is a tribute to the idea that professional wrestling is as much about character and narrative as it is about physical prowess. And in that sense, the Brooklyn Brawler will always be remembered as a pioneer who reminded us all that the heart of wrestling beats strongest in those who dare to be different, who embrace every fall as a stepping stone, and who never lose sight of the joy and humor inherent in the struggle. In reflecting on the storied career of the Brooklyn Brawler, one cannot help but be struck by the enduring impact of a wrestler who was never meant to be the champion, but who became a champion of the people through sheer determination and authentic character. His legacy is one of quiet heroism, a reminder that in the realm of professional wrestling, every role, no matter how small or seemingly insignificant, contributes to the grand narrative of the sport. The Brooklyn Brawler embodied the spirit of the underdog, embracing every loss with humor, humility, and a sense of purpose that transcended the boundaries of scripted rivalry. His journey serves as a poignant lesson that greatness is not measured solely by titles or accolades, but by the resilience, passion, and authenticity one brings to every challenge. Beyond the confines of the wrestling ring, his influence has permeated the industry, inspiring countless wrestlers to honor their roots and value the lessons that come from every setback. His ability to transform moments of defeat into opportunities for laughter and learning has cemented his status as a beloved figure whose impact will be felt for generations. Fans, veterans, and newcomers alike find solace in his story, a story of perseverance, grit, and the unyielding belief that every fall is but a prelude to rising again. In a world increasingly dominated by spectacle and superficial triumphs, the Brooklyn Brawler reminds us that true heroism lies in the simple act of continuing to fight, day after day, with a smile on one's face. As we celebrate his legacy, we are reminded that professional wrestling is not just a display of physical might, but also a theater of human emotion and experience. His career, marked by memorable matches, unscripted humor, and an unshakable connection with his audience, serves as a timeless testament to the art of storytelling in sports entertainment. The Brooklyn Brawler's enduring appeal is a tribute to the idea that sometimes the most important victories are those of the heart, where every bruise and every laugh writes a chapter in the great saga of life. His story is a beacon of hope and resilience, a narrative that will continue to inspire those who dare to dream and to fight, no matter how many times they may fall. Tito Santana wasn't in the game for drama. No sunglasses indoors, no locker room meltdowns, no leaving shows because catering ran out of quinoa. Tito was old school, but even the most respectful pro gets pushed now and then, and Santana had his limits, and a memory like a tax auditor. While he never went full burial mode, there were a few names that clearly irked him over the years. Minor gripes, silent glares, or just that veteran vibe of, this clown, ain't it? Today we're looking at 3 guys who got on Tito's nerves, and 1 guy he outright hated. And brother, that one, he never forgave him. Tito Santana was the kind of guy who could make anyone look good, from green rookies to bulldozers with boots. But when it came to Shawn Michaels, Tito kept it polite in public, but you could tell he wanted to hurl a flying forearm into the mirror Shawn always carried around. Tito Santana would comment on multiple shoot interviews over the years, saying, he changed. He became very arrogant. Shawn went from tag team mechanic in the Rockers to solo egomaniac in heartbreak-colored tights. Tito saw the shift, the overconfidence, the entitlement, and most of all, the disrespect. Santana never accused Shawn of burying him, but you could hear the veteran code in his voice. He didn't like the way Shawn carried himself, especially toward the older guys who paved the way. And Tito wasn't alone. Plenty of old-school names thought young Shawn acted like he discovered wrestling in 1992 and was doing everyone a favor by showing up. But to be clear, this wasn't hatred. Tito wasn't out here cutting promos and shoot interviews. He didn't call him toxic or dangerous. He just said what every guy in the locker room wanted to say, but knew they'd be labeled bitter. That kid thought he was too good for all of us. Tito saw the tights, the earrings, the attitude, and thought, this guy ain't a wrestler, he's a Bon Jovi backup dancer that knows how to bump. Michaels was the type of guy who wore zebra stripes and acted like Ric Flair owed him lunch money. To Tito, that kind of arrogance was the opposite of what the business was built on. Respect your opponent, respect the match, respect the ones who came before you. Shawn respected one thing, his reflection. Sergeant Slaughter walked into locker rooms like he was storming Omaha Beach with a clipboard. The chin came in 5 minutes before the rest of him. And Tito Santana, he didn't buy the act. No beef, no broken chairs, no stiff receipts, just that cold, crusty tension that follows a guy who thinks respect is something other people owe him. Tito said he could be difficult sometimes, not the easiest guy to work with behind the scenes. That's Tito being polite. What he really meant? This guy thinks he's Patton with a pair of tights. Sergeant Slaughter was one of those old school guys who treated the locker room like a military base, barking orders, picking favorites, and nodding only to people who played ball his way. If you weren't in his foxhole, he didn't see you. Tito wasn't looking to start shoot wars. He was a professional, but when he said someone was difficult, that was veteran speak for this clown's ego was bigger than his paychecks. Slaughter brought his gimmick to catering, to car rides, to the urinal if you let him, and if you didn't salute his presence backstage, good luck getting a hello. Tito didn't flip tables or scream in interviews, he just remembered. And if you saw how he handled guys like that in the ring, a few extra forearms, a little less oops, and a little more, you felt that one, didn't you? Slaughter wasn't hated. He was tolerated, like that uncle at Thanksgiving who wears medals to dinner and corrects everyone's posture. Tito smiled, then stiffed him a little. That's the Santana version of diplomacy. The Ultimate Warrior wasn't just a wrestler. He was a malfunctioning rocket with tassels, a guy who looked like a He-Man figure someone dropped in a blender. And Tito Santana? He saw right through it. No hate, no locker room brawl. Just deep, veteran-level irritation at a guy who blew through opponents like he was late for a tanning appointment. Tito came from the Bret Hart school of make it look real, make it safe, make it make sense. Warrior came from the school of sprint, scream, shake ropes, forget your own zip code. Santana never shot on him publicly, but he didn't need to. You could feel the disapproval every time Warrior no-sold a punch like it was a bug bite. Tito said he was not the easiest guy to work with. Everything was rushed, no psychology. That's as close as Tito ever got to calling someone a one-man demolition derby. Warrior would blast through matches with the grace of a refrigerator falling downstairs, and to a guy like Tito, who prided himself on timing and selling, that was heresy. And Warrior didn't shake hands, didn't communicate, didn't stick around. He was in, out, and halfway to the airport before you even took your boots off. Respect wasn't part of the act, and Santana never forgot it. This wasn't hate. Tito's too composed for that. But the message was clear. You don't respect the craft, I don't respect the noise. Warrior brought power, but left the ring colder than catering on a Monday. Tito gave him the rope shake and no sell, then filed it under, never again. This wasn't, I didn't like his attitude. This wasn't, he once stiffed me on a tag. This was real hate, the kind that bubbles behind a smile that gets held in the ribs for 40 years, like a receipt waiting to be delivered. Tito Santana and Greg Valentine didn't just have matches. They had wars, and Tito didn't forget a single bruise. Tito said he was stiff. He didn't take care of you in the ring. That's Tito being diplomatic. The real version? He hit me like I owed him rent and dated his sister. Valentine worked stiff, and not the fun kind. Not Stan Hansen. Oops, I caught your jaw, stiff. This was malicious stiffness. Tito once said he'd go home after a match with Greg and look like he got beat up by a vending machine. And the worst part? Valentine didn't care. He thought that was wrestling. Tito would throw a forearm. Greg would throw a dead body. Santana would bump. Valentine would sandbag like he was in quicksand wearing ankle weights. It wasn't just unprofessional. It was disrespect in slow motion. Greg moved like he was underwater, but hit like he was trying to cave your chest in just to see what your lungs looked like. And let's not pretend this was mutual. Tito didn't give it back. He played it straight, kept it pro, but behind the scenes, the hatred simmered. Tito didn't bury a lot of people in interviews, but when Valentine's name came up, he didn't flinch. He said it plain. He didn't protect you. He didn't care. That's not annoyance. That's loathing with a handshake. Valentine also had that classic, I'm doing you a favor energy. Tito's out here trying to tell a story, and Greg's working like it's a prison fight with a time limit. The man hit like he was trying to wake up your ancestors. At one point, Tito said he dreaded being booked against him. Imagine that. A guy as respected and tough as Tito saying, I don't want to deal with this psycho tonight. And don't get it twisted. They didn't just have one bad match. This was a long-term working relationship where one guy came to do business and the other came to give you free chiropractic damage. You want to know why Tito never smiled during those IC title feuds? Because he was getting chopped into another tax bracket. Greg Valentine moved like wet cement and hit like a pickup truck that didn't like Mexicans. Tito was like, I came here to work, not to get turned into guacamole with legs. To this day, Tito's still cordial in interviews, but you can feel it. If Greg Valentine walked into Tito's gym today, Tito would hand him a kettlebell and pray it slips. Tito Santana didn't whine, didn't politic, didn't start fights. He just remembered who stiffed him, who ghosted him, who treated the business like a trampoline park. And decades later, the names still surface, not because he wants revenge, but because some matches leave bruises that never fully heal. You want more of this? Real backstage grudges, no kayfabe, no sugarcoating, just the receipts that time didn't erase? Subscribe, follow, and we'll keep pulling the curtain back, one name at a time. Listen up, wrestling fans. Today we're diving into the career of Brady Boone, born Dean Robert Peters, a man who could flip through the air like a gymnast, but somehow always landed in the shadows. You might not remember him from the big moments because, well, the WWF didn't exactly know what to do with a guy who could do backflips while the main eventers lumbered around like they were in quicksand. Boone was a gymnast in high school, a fact that mattered more than his booking ever did. He turned that agility into a wrestling style that made every match he touched slightly more interesting, but also slightly unfair to anyone trying to pin him down. Despite winning tag titles in Pacific Northwest Wrestling and performing as the acrobatic Battle Cat, Boone's career was a series of almosts and fleeting opportunities. This is a story about talent that got buried under bad booking, and about a man whose influence on future high flyers is invisible but undeniable. Grab your popcorn. Brady Boone's story is high-flying, tragic, and absolutely savage. If this is the short-form video, click below for the full version. Now let's get right into it. All right, let's talk Brady Boone. Born Dean Robert Peters in 1960 in Minnesota, he grew up in the same hometown as Mr. Perfect and Rick Rude. So right from the start, he was swimming with sharks and occasionally getting chomped. A standout gymnast in high school, Boone had flips and agility most of the roster only dreamed of. He turned that into wrestling, but in true WWF fashion, they didn't know what to do with someone who could actually move. Boone debuted in 1984 with Don Owens' NWA Pacific Northwest Wrestling. He quickly won the tag titles twice, first with Coco Samoa, then with Ricky Santana. Not bad for a young high flyer. But when he hit the WWF in 1987, the story changed. He mostly wrestled opening matches, doing everything possible to make mid-carders look good while the big stars strutted in their egos. His Battle Cat gimmick in 1990 let him show his gymnastic chops, backflips, dives, acrobatics, but lasted as long as a sugar cube in hot tea. Behind the scenes, Boone wasn't bitter, just underutilized. Management apparently preferred lumbering wrestlers who could barely get over a second rope. Fellow wrestlers respected him. Most said he was safe, agile, and actually fun to work with. But being fun to work with didn't equal main event money. Boone's frustration was real, but he stayed professional. Despite it all, Boone's influence lingered. Future stars like Rob Van Dam took cues from his moves, though few remembered his name. His story is a mix of talent, wasted opportunity, and quiet inspiration. He may not have headlined WrestleMania, but he reminded the world that some wrestlers can fly higher than the spotlight will ever allow. And let's be honest, he flipped higher than half the WWF's attention span. Brady Boone arrived in the WWF in 1987, ready to dazzle, only to find himself booked like a background extra in a soap opera. The WWF was a circus of egos, and Boone, despite his athleticism, was treated like the guy holding the ladder while Hulk Hogan monologued. He was fast, agile, and technically sound, but apparently that wasn't flashy enough for Vince's vision of sports entertainment. Boone's high-flying style, which could have made him stand out, often clashed with the more traditional lumbering wrestlers of the time. Some reports suggest that bigger stars viewed him as showy or a risk to their safety, a classic case of backstage insecurity meeting actual talent. Boone reportedly kept his cool, but you could tell he was frustrated by the lack of opportunity. His Battle Cat gimmick in 1990 was meant to showcase him, but it lasted only a few weeks. 1 week, he was backflipping over opponents. The next, he was gone, like a gymnast disappearing into the shadows. Backstage, Boone was respected by those who worked with him. Wrestlers praised him for being safe and professional, which, in the WWF locker room, sometimes made you invisible. Management, however, didn't seem to care much about finesse. They wanted marketable characters, not a guy who could make a mid-carder look like a stunt double in Cirque du Soleil. Boone had talent spilling out of every pore, but the WWF booking had a way of bottling it up. Even in limited TV time, Boone left impressions. Fans noticed his aerial moves, and wrestlers noticed his reliability. Despite the frustration, he never lashed out publicly, keeping the heat contained to whispered backstage gripes. And let's be real, being the safest guy in a room full of egos doesn't get you a title shot. It gets you coffee duty and polite applause. Before we go any further, hit that like button and subscribe. Don't be like Vince McMahon ignoring Brady Boone's talent. Actually notice the good stuff in front of you. Every click keeps these stories alive. And unlike Boone's Battle Cat gimmick, this channel isn't going anywhere. Before the WWF treated him like a curtain jerker, Brady Boone was lighting up the Pacific Northwest. He started working for Don Owens' promotion in 1984, and this is where people first saw just how different he was. Boone didn't wrestle like a traditional territory guy. He wrestled like a gymnast who'd accidentally stumbled into a fight. His agility was insane, and fans immediately noticed he brought something fresh to the scene. In 1986, Boone struck gold twice. First, he won the NWA Pacific Northwest Tag Team Championship with Coco Samoa in March, then repeated the feat with Ricky Santana in October. That's not bad for a guy who, at the time, still looked more like a college athlete than a grizzled territory brawler. The crowds in Portland weren't used to backflips and lightning-quick counters, but Boone gave them exactly that. He wasn't just wrestling, he was ahead of the curve. Of course, even success came with limitations. Boone was billed as the cousin of Billy Jack Haynes, a storyline connection designed to boost him. Did it help? A little. But it also boxed him into someone else's shadow, like being the warm-up act for a band no one bought tickets to see. Boone was talented enough to shine without that gimmick, but promoters loved those family connections. The Pacific Northwest days showed Boone's potential, but they also foreshadowed his future problem, being great in the ring while management saw him as an accessory. Still, his work in that territory proved he could hang with anyone, and it gave him credibility when Vince came calling. Boone was clearly the guy you wanted to watch, if only someone gave him the platform. Instead, his career was like one long gymnastics routine. Amazing execution, but no judges paying attention. The Battle Cat era. WWF saw Brady Boone, a gymnast turned wrestler with insane aerial skills, and thought, yeah, let's put him in a furry catsuit. That'll do it. Genius, right? Nothing screams top-tier athlete like a guy prancing around like a giant Halloween costume, performing flips no one asked for. Boone had already proven himself in the territories, tag titles, fast-paced matches, a reputation for being safe yet exciting. But WWF didn't care. They didn't want him to shine. They wanted him to be cute, marketable, and utterly forgettable. Battle Cat lasted a few weeks, giving Boone the kind of exposure usually reserved for opening match filler and mid-card let's try something weird experiments. Meanwhile, bigger stars strutted around, hardly moving, while the guy who could actually pull off backflips and hold a match together got stuck in a costume that could have been rented from Party City. Management's vision of what fans wanted apparently didn't include talent or skill, just fuzzy gimmicks and clever merchandising ideas. Boone's frustration was real. He was ready to innovate and push the high-flying style into the mainstream, but WWF shoved him into a corner. Still, he kept professional, did his job, and made the gimmick as watchable as it could be, which, let's be honest, wasn't saying much. In the end, Battle Cat proved one thing. WWF doesn't reward talent, they reward ideas that look cute on a toy shelf. Boone had the moves, the skill, and the brains, but WWF only had a catsuit. Brady Boone's story didn't end with Battle Cat, it just drifted into the background while the WWF's main eventers hogged the spotlight. After his short-lived gimmick, Boone bounced around smaller promotions, including a stint in WCW where he was competent, agile, and still too talented to be treated like filler. It's the kind of career that makes you shake your head. A guy with skill, charisma, and aerial wizardry, yet constantly booked like an afterthought. Backstage, Boone was respected. Wrestlers knew he was safe, reliable, and genuinely fun to work with. A rare commodity in a locker room full of divas and egos. But in an era when the company valued size over skill, charisma over craft, Boone's contributions went largely unnoticed. Still, his influence trickled down. High flyers like Rob Van Dam and other cruiserweights carried pieces of Boone's style into bigger arenas, even if his name didn't make the marquee. Tragically, Boone passed away in 1998 at just 37 years old, leaving behind a story full of unrealized potential. The wrestling world lost not just a talented performer, but a man who quietly set a blueprint for athletic, high-flying wrestlers in an era dominated by big men and cartoonish gimmicks. On December 15, 1998, Brady Boone, born Dean Robert Peters, died in a car accident while driving home to Tampa, Florida, from a WCW television taping in Orlando. He was 40 years old. Boone had been working as a referee for the WCW after his wrestling career wound down. Tragically, his life was cut short during this drive, leaving the wrestling world in shock. Despite his smaller stature, Boone had a significant impact on the wrestling community. He was known for his athleticism and high-flying style, which influenced many future stars, including Rob Van Dam. Van Dam has credited Boone with helping him early in his career and introducing him to the opportunities in Japan. In tribute, Van Dam incorporated some of Boone's moves into his own repertoire. Following Boone's death, WCW acknowledged his passing with a brief tribute on their television program. However, the company did not provide a significant public memorial. This lack of recognition was noted by some in the wrestling community, highlighting the industry's sometimes fleeting acknowledgement of talent. Boone is buried in an unmarked grave at Trinity Memorial Gardens in Trinity, Florida. His untimely death remains a poignant reminder of the fragility of life and the often overlooked contributions of wrestlers who don't always make the headlines. Boone's career was a series of flips, impressive, precise, but too often landing in obscurity. And maybe that's the cruelest irony. The guy who could soar higher than almost anyone in the ring was constantly held down by booking, bad gimmicks, and a company that didn't know how to use him. And let's be honest, if talent alone got titles, Brady Boone would have had more gold than Hogan. Brady Boone's career was a masterclass in unrealized potential. A gymnast in a world of giants, he flipped, soared, and innovated while WWE's booking team clutched their cat suits and ignored him. From Pacific Northwest tag titles to Battle Cat's fleeting fame, Boone left an impression on anyone paying attention, which, sadly, wasn't always the company. They say time heals all wounds, but whoever said that clearly never met Brian Blair and the Iron Sheik. This wasn't some playful locker room rib or backstage story cooked up for laughs. This was two real guys who flat out hated each other, for decades. Blair's the kind of guy who will shake your hand and smile for the crowd. But if you cross him, he'll quietly twist your arm until you tap. Literally, in Sheik's case. Their beef wasn't born from jealousy, it came from a night in Hershey, Pennsylvania, where a wrestling match turned into a real fight. From that moment, Sheik carried a grudge like it was an Olympic medal. And just when you think it cooled down years later, Sheik slapped Blair at a roast right in front of a room full of people. But Sheik wasn't the only one who found himself at odds with Blair. There were others who felt the quiet Florida charm turn into fury, from backstage fights to busted promises. Tonight, we'll dig into all of it, from the locker room punches to the microphone shots. This isn't locker room gossip. It's one of wrestling's longest, most bitter shoot rivalries. And tonight, we're diving into every inch of it. Before there was paint, wigs, and rubber hammers, Matt Bourne was a guy you didn't screw with. And Brian Blair found that out the hard way. This wasn't one of those boys will be boys backstage scuffles. This was a legit brawl, the kind where the boys stop joking and start clearing the hallway. According to multiple shoot interviews, Blair and Bourne went from jawing to trading real punches, and it wasn't a friendly spar. Even Blair described it years later as brutal. No one can even agree on what sparked it. Some say it was over a rib gone wrong, others that Bourne's temper just hit boiling point. Either way, when it kicked off, everyone got the hell out of the way. Bourne was known for being a heavy hitter, both in and out of the ring, but Blair wasn't exactly a pushover. Florida kid, amateur wrestling background, freak grip strength, not a guy you rough up for long. Witnesses say the scuffle was loud enough that other wrestlers paused their own prep, peeking out of locker rooms, wondering who would be carried out first. The air smelled of sweat, adrenaline, and bad decisions. Exactly the combination that makes locker room stories legendary. The fight became part of wrestling lore. Some say Bourne won, others say Blair choked him out. The truth's probably somewhere in the middle, but it doesn't matter. What mattered was respect. After that night, Bourne never tried him again. For Blair, it was another day surviving the business. For everyone else watching, it was proof that the smiling killer bee wasn't someone you wanted to sting first. And if you ever wondered whether Blair's calm demeanor was all for show, that hallway fight erased every doubt. Brian Blair's second real backstage heat wasn't a fist fight, but it stung just as bad, and it involved Jim Brunzell, his partner in the Killer Bees. On paper, they were perfect, athletic, charismatic, and with a gimmick that made fans cheer. In reality, the tag team world was a jungle, and sometimes even your best friend could be your source of frustration. Blair has openly discussed how management promises caused tension. The pair were repeatedly teased with tag team championship runs, only to be sidelined at the last minute. For a team that worked tirelessly, traveling nonstop, and putting their bodies on the line, this wasn't just disappointment, it was real backstage heat. Blair admitted the frustration sometimes boiled over into disagreements with Brunzell, even though they both shared the same goal. Part of the tension came from navigating the office politics. Brunzell had his own baggage. Prior legal entanglements over merchandise, action figures, and disputes with other promoters meant he arrived with heat on his back. Blair, fresh into the scene, found himself caught in the middle, sometimes defending his partner, sometimes frustrated by the limelight being so inconsistently handed out. Sources confirm Blair and Brunzell weren't enemies, but the stress of unkept promises and backstage politics created moments of real tension. Their relationship was professional, but moments of frustration, slammed doors, terse words, and cold shoulders left a mark. Blair has admitted that he and Brunzell often had to separate personal feelings from the business to survive. In the end, the Killer Bees thrived despite it, but the lessons lingered. Even in a tag team, backstage heat could fester, and sometimes the hardest battles weren't in the ring, but in negotiating respect, recognition, and creative fairness. For Blair, this was a backstage schooling in patience, resilience, and knowing exactly when to speak up and when to zip it. Before we dive into the Sheik saga, hit that like button. Don't make Blair have to sting your channel for attention. Subscribe, ring the bell, and stay in the hive, because the next 3 segments are where the real venom flows. Don't miss it. Brian Blair walked into Hershey, Pennsylvania, ready to work a match. The Sheik walked in ready to humiliate someone. And guess who got the honor? Yeah, Blair. Sheik tried an ankle pick that hit harder than a cement truck on payday. Blair didn't flinch. He snapped on a double wrist lock so fast it was like watching a spider choke a fly. Sheik tapped. That's right, the legendary Iron Sheik, tapping like a scared kid at detention. Humiliation? Served cold. Backstage, the smell of Sheik's pride burning could have powered a small city. Blair said it straight. This wasn't a work. Sheik's ego was shattered, and everyone in the locker room knew it. Even the referees walked on eggshells. One wrong word and it could have escalated into a full-on cage fight. Other wrestlers whispered. Some laughed. Some prayed. Blair? He just cleaned up the mess and acted like it was another Tuesday. The Sheik, meanwhile, nursed a grudge that lasted decades. Every time he saw Blair, it was like his brain flashed that double wrist lock in Hershey, and he wanted revenge. Blair survived the match, kept his dignity, and earned a backstage reputation. Don't test the Killer Bee. He was calm, calculated, and quietly lethal. And Sheik learned the hard way that smiling in the ring doesn't mean you're harmless. Sometimes it means you're the last person you want to piss off. If Hershey was a test of skill, the roast was a test of ego, and Sheik failed spectacularly. Years after their Hershey clash, Blair and the Sheik ended up at a roast. One would think this was all laughs, jokes, and polite applause. Nope. Sheik, still simmering from that infamous wrist lock, decided to make his point. With a slap, right across Blair's face. Public humiliation? Check. Backstage venom? Double check. Blair has confirmed in interviews. It wasn't a work. Sheik slapped him for real, and the room froze. You could hear crickets thinking twice about ever crossing either man. Blair, of course, didn't respond with violence. He didn't need to. The slap was more embarrassing for Sheik than anyone else. Watching a legend reduce himself to a red-faced, flailing man-child was entertainment enough. Backstage, the story spread like wildfire. Everyone knew Sheik was still carrying Hershey in his ego like a personal grudge suitcase. But Blair? He smiled, shrugged, and kept going. That's Blair in a nutshell. Calm on the surface, lethal underneath. The slap didn't break him. It just cemented his reputation. He survives anything, and he remembers everything. Some wrestlers reportedly warned newcomers, if you ever see Blair and Sheik together, keep your distance. The air between them could choke you, and Blair's take? Purely savage. He slapped me in front of a room full of people, and I let him look like an idiot. That's talent. The roast slap wasn't just a moment, and it was proof. Blair could handle the in-ring shoot, the backstage politics, and the public humiliation. Sheik's ego, on the other hand, couldn't handle a wrist lock or punchline. Decades of whispers, rumors, and locker room tall tales finally met the truth. Brian Blair didn't just survive the Iron Sheik, he dismantled him. This wasn't a scripted punch, a friendly rib, or a backstage joke. It was pure, unfiltered chaos. And Sheik? He got humiliated. Repeatedly. Hershey, Pennsylvania. Sheik shoots on Blair. Blair snaps a double wrist lock. Sheik taps. Ego destroyed. Fast forward years later. The roast slap. Public humiliation. Front of a room full of people. Blair didn't flinch. He didn't need to. Watching Sheik flail like a baby in a wrestling costume was entertainment enough. That slap wasn't a work. He really did it. I didn't blink. Blair confirms and shoots. Blair breaks it down. Wrestling isn't brute strength. It's patience, brains, and timing. You can rage, you can slap, you can scream, but if you cross him, he'll sting, disappear, and make sure the entire locker room watches you eat dirt. That's how the Killer Bee operates. The lesson? Ego doesn't beat skill. Pride doesn't beat patience. And the Sheik? He's remembered for getting played by a guy who smiles like a friendly bee while stinging like a motherfucker. Blair's final words, sharp enough to sting anyone repeating the myth. I didn't start it, I just finished it, politely, and he never lived it down. Decades later, the story remains the same. Blair walked in calm, walked out respected, and left Sheik's ego in ashes. That's the real history. That's the killer bee. So that's the story. Blair took punches, wrist locks, and slaps, and came out buzzing while the Sheik's ego smoldered in the corner. From Matt Bourne to Jim Brunzell, and finally the Sheik's public humiliation, Blair's locker room resume reads like a checklist of survival and quiet domination. He doesn't brag. He doesn't need to. Every grudge, every tension, every slap, filed under lesson learned. And if you think the killer bee's sting is done, think again. It's still sharp, still deadly, and still leaves egos in ashes. Well, that's all for today. I hope you enjoyed the video. Don't just buzz off. Hit like, subscribe, and ring that bell. Stick around for more backstage heat, real shoot stories, and the kind of savage honesty only wrestling's grittiest vets can deliver. Paul Roma was the kind of wrestler who could start a fight in an empty room and still leave the room looking worse than he did. His career wasn't built on championship reigns or big money runs. It was built on grudges, shoot interviews, and the ability to annoy just about everyone he ever stood next to. Roma didn't climb the ladder of success. He stood at the bottom, kicked the rungs off, told the guy holding it he was an idiot, then complained nobody helped him up. Everywhere Roma went, bitterness followed like a bad smell. He didn't just rub people the wrong way. He practically used sandpaper. For every highlight in the ring, there was a low light backstage, and Roma seemed to take pride in turning opportunities into hostilities. If resentment was a championship, Roma would have been a Hall of Famer. His grudges weren't passing moods. They were full-blown sagas, dragged out in public and retold with venom years later. Fans saw arrogance. Peers saw ego. Roma saw himself as the only honest man in a room of liars. This isn't about glory. This is Roma's legacy of grudges. Sharp, bitter, and unforgettable. Roma didn't just clash with management and fans, he clashed with his own tag partner. When Power and Glory first formed, Roma recalled Hercules giving him a look like he wanted to stab me. That's not exactly the start of a brotherhood, more like a murder trial waiting to happen. In the ring, they clicked enough to get reactions, but backstage it was frostier than a freezer's aisle at a grocery store. Roma admitted the tension never fully went away, and it made every day on the road a subtle war of patience and ego. The WWF's handling of Power and Glory only added fuel. Roma claims management deliberately held them back. No merchandise, minimal pushes, and then an abrupt split just as the team started gaining momentum. Roma said the office punished them for being too good without the chosen one's stamp of approval. Every match, every promo, Roma felt like they were fighting against the company more than their opponents. Roma didn't exactly describe Hercules as invested either. He said Herc was distant, sometimes resentful, and often appeared more interested in leaving the building than backing him up. That attitude turned what could have been a solid team into a powder keg. Roma constantly braced for the next blow, whether from management or his own partner. Looking back, Roma's anger was aimed at management and at Hercules. Power and Glory could have been iconic. Instead, Roma says the company blocked the merchandise, blocked the push, and blocked the future. And Hercules? He just blocked Roma. Every handshake backstage felt like a battlefield. It's one of Roma's most bitter chapters. A team destined for greatness, buried under backstage politics, mistrust, and ego. Roma wasn't just taking shots at management or partners. He had a long-running beef with the fans and the so-called Four Horsemen faithful who refused to accept him. According to Roma, joining the Horsemen was supposed to be a career highlight, but fans treated him like an interloper from day one. They didn't see a member of the elite. They saw a guy who didn't belong, and Roma didn't hold back in calling them jealous weekend warriors. He said the criticism wasn't just unfair, it was relentless, following him from arena to arena, like a bad smell that wouldn't wash off. Backstage, Roma could hear it too. Other wrestlers would joke or make offhand comments about his spot in the Horsemen, which only added salt to the wound. Roma claimed he worked harder than anyone else, hit every mark, and still got the side eye from the locker room and the crowd alike. Every cheer for the team, every reaction, was measured against what fans thought he should be doing. And Roma said that never stopped him from calling the hypocrisy out in interviews. The backlash didn't break him, but it left a mark. Roma said being part of the Horsemen taught him that sometimes the people applauding you are the same ones rooting against you in their heads. Fans hated his look, his style, even his name being on the roster, and Roma ate that hate like it was breakfast. He didn't beg for approval, didn't sugarcoat the resentment, and didn't pretend to care about their verdicts. Roma didn't just call out DiBiase, he roasted him alive. According to Roma, Ted spent his career preaching morals, faith, and integrity while quietly hustling every angle and paycheck he could grab. Roma's line cut deep. At the end of the day, his God is spelled M-O-N-E-Y. That's not a metaphor. That's a verdict on a man wrapped in a halo while treating loyalty like it was a coupon to be cashed whenever convenient. Roma said the problem wasn't ambition, it was hypocrisy. Ted cloaked greed and virtue, smiled for the cameras, and then did whatever lined his wallet. Roma claimed this wasn't subtle. Every backstage move, every business choice, every moral lesson he pushed, all profit-driven PR, and Roma saw it. He said that when push came to shove, Ted would pick money over loyalty time and time again. Roma's words didn't come in the heat of the 80s locker room. They came decades later when he had nothing to lose and no reason to hold back. In shoot interviews, he unloaded on a man he saw as a walking contradiction. Fans might have still bought the polished image, but Roma tore it apart, saying the morals were just a mask and the reality underneath was pure hypocrisy. Roma's final judgment was brutal. Preachings were scams, morality a facade, and lessons worthless. Calling out Ted wasn't optional, it was necessary. Roma did it publicly, mercilessly, and left a scar that still stings decades later. Roma didn't just dislike Hogan, he flat out challenged him to a real fight. On the Power and Glory podcast, Roma went in with no filter. I'm talking about none other than brother Hulk Hogan. I'm going to slap the taste of brother out of his mouth. That's not heat. That's Roma, basically telling Hogan he'd rather see him unconscious than on another t-shirt. The grudge came from a personal story. Roma recalled a disabled child showing up late to a Hogan meet and greet. Instead of sticking around a few minutes, Hogan allegedly walked out. Roma never forgave it. He branded Hogan selfish, saying the act exposed the real man behind the bandana, a guy more interested in clocking out than giving joy to a kid who needed it most. For Roma, that wasn't just rude. It was career-ending evidence that Hogan's hero aura was as fake as his spray tan. Roma went further, saying he'd meet Hogan in an octagon and didn't even care if he lost. He just wanted the chance to slap the taste out of him. That's not confidence, that's hatred served raw. Hogan might have called everyone brother, but to Roma, he was just another fraud with a bad dye job. Roma's clash with Vince wasn't a cold grudge, it was a volcanic eruption. On Sean Mooney's Primetime podcast, Roma recounted storming into Vince's office in 1994. He wasn't there to kiss rings, he was there to unload. Roma said flat out, "Power and Glory was the greatest team you ever had, and you did nothing with them." That's not a complaint. That's a middle finger to the man who built an empire by picking winners and leaving others in the dirt. Roma's anger was personal. He nearly lost an arm working through injuries for Vince, and instead of recognition, he felt discarded. While others took time off for what he mocked as a hangnail, Roma and Hercules killed themselves in the ring for scraps. Roma wasn't asking for a medal. He was demanding respect, and Vince didn't give it. The argument got ugly. Roma said Vince got heated, stood up and tried to puff his chest. Roma fired back with the line that echoed through shoot interviews for years. "You better sit the funk down before I knock you out." Few men in wrestling ever dared say that to Vince. Roma didn't just dare, he meant it. This wasn't petty bitterness. It was a man who felt robbed, staring at the billionaire who cashed the checks and calling him out as a fraud to his face. Roma's honesty was nuclear, his fury real. And if security hadn't been nearby, Vince might have left the office with fewer teeth than his wrestlers. Roma never sugarcoated anything, and that's why his grudges hit harder than most people's punches. He wasn't trying to play politics or rewrite history, he was burning it to the ground. Every story, every beef, every outburst showed the same thing. Paul Roma was never built to bow down. He was built to speak up, even if it cost him everything. Tom Zenk looked like a star from day one. Square jaw, big smile, shredded body. He was a promoter's dream, but the business quickly turned into his personal nightmare. Instead of rising to the top, Zenk became known as the good-looking guy who walked out, burned bridges, and then went on shoot interviews to complain about everyone else. Fans remember him as the Z-Man in WCW, a decent worker with a flashy drop kick. Wrestlers, though, they remember him as the guy who'd smile at you in the locker room, then bury you in an interview 6 months later. If Zenk had been paid in bitterness, he'd have been the richest man in wrestling. He walked out on WWF, soured on WCW, and left promoters pulling their hair out. Zenk didn't just hate the politics of the business, he hated specific people. And unlike most wrestlers who buried grudges for the sake of a payday, he made sure his were heard loud and clear. Today, we're cutting through the Z-Man's glossy exterior and digging into the people Zenk absolutely couldn't stand. Trust me, he swung harder in interviews than he ever did in the ring. When Tom Zenk hit WWF in 1987, he thought he'd made it. The Can-Am connection with Rick Martel looked like a money machine. But Zenk found out quickly that Vince McMahon didn't see money when he looked at him. He saw expendable. The core of Zenk's hatred for WWF came down to the contract. He discovered Martel was secretly earning more despite promises of equality. When Zenk walked out, Vince didn't just let him go. He branded him a quitter and made sure promoters heard it. In wrestling, being called a quitter is like having "do not hire" tattooed on your forehead. Zenk hated Vince for letting that image stick. He claimed he wasn't even given the chance to speak directly to McMahon about the money dispute. Instead, Vince sided with Martel, sued Zenk for breach of contract, and blackballed him in the process. From that point on, Zenk wasn't just anti-WWF, he was openly hostile. He blasted Vince in interviews, accusing him of running a company where loyalty only flowed one way. Zenk never forgave him for turning a pay dispute into a career-killing stigma. Zenk once said, "They slapped that quitter label on me. That's all promoters needed to bury you." For Vince, it was just business. For Zenk, it was betrayal that burned for decades. And let's be honest, if McMahon really thought Zenk mattered, he would have at least put him in court instead of just putting him in the dirt. Vince didn't just win, he barely noticed he'd been in a fight. If Zenk hated Vince McMahon, then WCW management made his blood boil. Under Jim Herd and later Eric Bischoff, the company was chaos dressed in Turner money. And Zenk was never shy about letting everyone know how much he despised the clowns running the circus. With Herd, Zenk thought he was dealing with a guy who didn't even understand wrestling. Herd was an ex-pizza executive notorious for out-of-touch gimmick ideas. For Zenk, it was proof that the lunatics had taken over the asylum. He couldn't stomach the idea of his career being dictated by someone whose experience in the ring was zero and whose decisions were dictated by office politics rather than wrestling sense. Then came Bischoff. On the surface, slick and corporate. But Zenk saw him as another suit who cared more about Hogan's tan than the mid-card's paychecks. In interviews, Zenk tore into WCW for rewarding office stooges, while workers like him got crumbs. His hatred wasn't subtle. He called WCW a political swamp where talent didn't matter, only who you sucked up to. Herd-era gimmicks like the Hunchbacks only reinforced his point that the office ran the show, not the wrestlers. They didn't care about the wrestlers, just their own egos and keeping their power. That wasn't bitterness talking, that was his mission statement. He despised the hypocrisy. WCW advertised itself as the alternative, but behind the curtain, it was the same corrupt game he'd left in the WWF. If anything, it was worse, because WCW didn't even try to hide it. In the end, Zenk hated the office more than any heel across the ring. At least wrestlers hit you in the chest, not the paycheck. Tom Zenk didn't hold back when it came to in-ring talent he couldn't respect, and Steve Strong, also known as Steve DiSalvo, was at the top of that list. Zenk's problem wasn't personal drama or politics. It was simple. Strong was stiff, clumsy, and dangerous in the ring. In Zenk's eyes, that made him a liability. Zenk described working with Strong as like wrestling a moving brick wall. One misstep from Strong, and Zenk could be looking at a busted nose or a pulled tendon. And he didn't mince words. In shoot interviews, he called Strong a caveman klutz who shouldn't have been allowed in a ring with anyone who had a pulse. He felt Strong's style risked careers, not just his own ego. The hatred went beyond professional frustration. Zenk despised that promoters kept putting him with Strong, pretending it was a fair matchup. In Zenk's eyes, it was negligence. You can forgive a bad match, but risking injury because management wanted a spectacle? That's unforgivable. Zenk also made it clear that he didn't respect wrestlers who relied solely on size or looks without skill. Strong was tall, strong, and impressive looking. But Zenk said all that mattered was control, precision, and safety. And Strong had none of them. He laughed about it later in interviews, but the humor was savage. Working with him was like letting a gorilla drive a sports car. You pray it doesn't crash, then it does. Zenk's contempt for Strong was rooted in talent, not ego, which somehow made it even more brutal in his shoot-style breakdowns. If anyone deserves the full fire, it's Rick Martel. Tom Zenk's former tag partner wasn't just a teammate. He was the architect of Zenk's professional misery. In Zenk's own words, Martel lied about pay, manipulated contracts, and smeared his name behind the scenes. This wasn't locker room friction. It was career sabotage. The Can-Am connection looked shiny on paper, but behind the scenes, it was a nightmare. Zenk discovered Martel was secretly earning more money while presenting them as equals. When Zenk quit WWF, Martel spread the quitter label faster than a low blow at a Survivor Series match. Zenk's reputation was torched overnight. Zenk didn't hold back. Rick Martel betrayed me. I couldn't trust him, not in money, not in business. He blamed Martel for the legal mess, the blackballing, and the endless whispers in every promotion he went to afterward. Every handshake was a landmine, every conversation a reminder of Martel's duplicity. Martel's greed and ego were the stuff of legend. Zenk recounted being blindsided by promoters siding with Martel, watching as his career momentum was crushed while Martel sailed smoothly to singles pushes. For Zenk, this wasn't a business lesson. It was a personal betrayal the size of WrestleMania itself. In interviews, Zenk let the venom fly. He roasted Martel with surgical precision. He made our partnership look equal, then pocketed everything and told the suits I was the problem. If there's a wrestling hell, he's already booked the front row seat. That's not bitterness. That's historical record. Martel burned Zenk's trust, his finances, and his opportunities. For Zenk, it wasn't just a breakup, it was a crucifixion. And unlike most wrestling stories, this one leaves ashes you can actually smell. Barry Horowitz, the most famous jobber in the history of the WWF. A man whose entire career was basically a slow-motion car crash with Vince McMahon driving and Barry waving from the back seat. Every time he walked down that aisle, you didn't wonder who'd win. You wondered how embarrassing the loss would be. Horowitz wasn't bad. He could wrestle, he understood psychology, and he could make anyone look good. But Vince didn't want him to look good. He wanted him to look like a man auditioning for the role of corpse. Barry was so reliable at losing they should have given him a loyalty card. Lose 10 matches, get a free concussion. The sad part? He didn't just make others look strong, he made entire careers possible. Without Horowitz, half the mid-card would have looked like clumsy amateurs. And yet, Barry leaned into it. He had the self-pat on the back, that smug little gesture that basically said, yes, I lost, but at least I'm not paying alimony. He embraced being the human crash test dummy. And in wrestling, that's worth something. This is Barry Horowitz, WWF's biggest jobber. Barry Horowitz stepped into the WWF in the late 80s, and right from the start, his destiny was sealed. He wasn't there to be a hero, a villain, or even a mid-card hopeful. He was there to lose, over and over again. And if you think that sounds depressing, remember, in wrestling, somebody has to get pinned. The only problem for Barry was that it was always him. He wrestled the likes of Bret Hart, Mr. Perfect, Ted DiBiase, even Yokozuna. Every match was the same story. Barry comes in, shows off his technical skills for a minute, maybe gets in a headlock, then gets flattened like roadkill. He wasn't booked to be competitive, he was booked to be a warning sign. This is what happens to you if Vince doesn't like your face. What made it worse? Horowitz could wrestle. The man had amateur credentials, smooth execution, and great timing. But Vince didn't see a wrestler. He saw a designated loser. And Barry played the role with such commitment, you'd think he was gunning for an Oscar and best performance as a human doormat. Crowds didn't hate him, they pitied him. Kids probably whispered, "Dad, is he ever going to win?" And Dad had to answer, "Son, this guy's career is one long funeral procession." Horowitz spent so much time flat on his back, he could have been sponsored by Sleep Number. Still, his reliability made him valuable. Vince knew he could throw anyone at Barry, and they'd come out looking strong. Barry was professional, safe, and always willing. In an industry full of egos, Horowitz accepted his fate. He was the guy who made stars, by never being one himself. By the early 90s, Barry Horowitz had carved out a reputation as the WWF's most reliable loser. But he didn't just lie down and take it, he made a gimmick out of it. That little self-pat on the back after a loss became his trademark. It was a mix of defiance and resignation, like he was saying, "Yes, I lost, again, but at least I showed up and didn't hurt anyone." Audiences couldn't help but laugh, partly at the gesture, partly at the absurdity of it. It was genius in a tragic way. Barry could have been a mid-carder or even a dark horse star. He had the skill, the timing, and the conditioning, but didn't see that. Vince saw a guy who could make others look good. So Horowitz turned humiliation into performance art, finding a tiny bit of control in a career otherwise dictated by other people's victories. Fans started to respect him for it, even if the company never did. And if you listened closely, you could hear the sadness in the gesture. A man who knew he was better than his losses, but could never escape them. It wasn't tragedy screaming, it was quiet disappointment wrapped in a joke. Yet the pat on the back worked. It gave the crowd a moment, a chuckle, a humanizing beat in a show full of muscle-bound egos. Barry owned his role as the perpetual underdog, and he did it with style, professionalism, and a weird sort of dignity. In a business full of heartbreak and ego, sometimes the most tragic story is the one that looks funny on TV. For Barry Horowitz, this was his lottery ticket moment. After years of being cannon fodder, he finally did the unthinkable. He won a match. His opponent? Skip from the Body Donnas. Not exactly Hogan, but when you've spent a career losing, pinning anyone felt like toppling a king. The crowd exploded. Not because Horowitz was their hero, but because it was so absurd. It was like watching the substitute teacher win a fist fight with the principal. People didn't believe it at first. Barry, this perennial loser, finally standing tall for once. The look on Skip's face said it all. My career just got ruined by the guy who loses to everybody. WWF played into it too. They milked Horowitz's miracle win, booking him in a short program where he actually looked competitive. He even won matches on pay-per-view, which felt like watching a man who's been hit by buses for 10 years suddenly dodge one. For Barry, it was vindication, a brief moment where his talent was acknowledged. But let's be honest, Vince wasn't building Barry Horowitz into a star. He was creating a novelty act, a sideshow. Barry wasn't suddenly climbing the card. He was the joke that had accidentally gotten over, and the company squeezed it for a few weeks before quietly burying him again. Still, for Horowitz, those wins mattered. After years of humiliation, he got to stand in the ring and hear cheers that weren't ironic. For once, he wasn't the punchline. And that fleeting moment of glory is what people remember today. Barry Horowitz, the man who lost everything, except that one beautiful, ridiculous win. After that miracle win in 1995, the WWF gave Barry Horowitz something he'd never had before: momentum. For a few months, he wasn't just that guy who always loses. He was Barry Horowitz, the underdog who'd finally broken through. He beat Skip again, appeared at SummerSlam, and suddenly found himself in matches where the outcome wasn't guaranteed. For fans, it was surreal, like finding out your dog can drive. Barry even got paired with Hakushi, forming a strange underdog duo that nobody expected. It was fun, it was fresh, and for the first time, Horowitz wasn't just the punchline, he was the story. The crowd bought into it too. They weren't cheering ironically anymore. They actually wanted to see him win. That's the beauty of wrestling. Sometimes the audience latches onto the guy management never wanted, just to spite the system. But reality came crashing back. Vince McMahon was never going to make Barry Horowitz a real star. His push fizzled out as quickly as it started. Within months, he was right back where he'd been for years, staring at the lights, putting over everyone else. It was like getting invited to the party, then being asked to fetch the drinks. And here's the sad part. Barry didn't screw up. He didn't blow it. He was professional, skilled, and the fans liked him. But in Vince's world, perception was everything, and Barry was still a jobber no matter what. His short run at the top was basically a corporate prank. Look, the loser won. Okay, joke's over. For Barry, those months meant the world. For Vince, they were filler. That's wrestling in a nutshell. One man's career highlight is another man's bathroom breaks. When people look back at Barry Horowitz, they don't remember championships, main events, or classic promos. They remember losses. Dozens, hundreds, piled up over years. And here's the thing, that's his legacy. Barry wasn't the guy who set arenas on fire. He was the guy who made sure the fire looked good on camera. Wrestling is cruel like that. Someone has to lose, and Barry made losing an art form. He took it seriously. He bumped hard, sold everything, and made opponents look like monsters. If Bret Hart was the excellence of execution, Barry was the excellence of exits. He lost so many times, you could time a pay-per-view by his shoulders hitting the mat. Yet there's respect there. Fans still talk about him, not out of pity, but out of admiration. He was the everyman who never got the spotlight, but still carved out a place in history. He proved you could matter in wrestling without winning, if you were professional enough to embrace humiliation with consistency. But the dark truth? That role came with a cost. Barry was too good at being the fall guy. Management never saw him as anything else. His miracle win, his short push, all of it was temporary. He was always destined to go back to lying flat, staring at the lights, clapping himself on the back like a man applauding his own funeral. And maybe that's the saddest joke of all. Barry Horowitz mattered, but not for what he did, for what he gave up so others could shine. He was the sacrificial lamb with a permanent smile, a career defined not by victories, but by the cruel poetry of defeat. Barry Horowitz will never be remembered as a champion, but he'll always be remembered. That's the paradox. He lost so much it became his identity. And instead of bitterness, he leaned into it, clapping himself on the back while everyone else climbed over him. That takes guts, or maybe a total lack of options. Either way, he carved out wrestling's cruelest legacy, the ultimate fall guy. So hit like and subscribe. Don't make me Barry Horowitz, applauding myself while everyone else wins. At least give me one victory on the scoreboard. Most wrestlers leave behind a trail of broken chairs and burnt bridges, not Lanny Poffo. The guy wore a graduation cap and read poems, but the only test he ever failed was holding a grudge of his own. That's because his whole life became one giant tribute act to Randy Savage's hatred. He didn't live to get even, he lived to stay loyal. This ain't your usual top 5 hate list. Lanny didn't slash tires or slap people in catering. What he did do? Spent 30 years throwing verbal elbows at the people Randy couldn't stand. Vince McMahon, WWF's Hall of Fame committee, and anyone who disrespected the House of Poffo. He was like Randy's beef courier. Next day delivery, no signature required. So today, we ain't clowning on who Lanny hated. We're breaking down who Lanny hated on behalf of his brother. Let's get into it. Randy Savage and Vince McMahon had a relationship messier than a wrestling promo gone off script. Randy left WWF in May '94, but Lanny Poffo had already bounced out earlier that year, so he wasn't exactly backstage holding Randy's coat. That said, Lanny never let the family beef die. He was the designated Poffo grudge carrier, keeping Randy's hatred alive long after the Slim Jims stopped flying in the ring. Vince disrespected Randy with Hall of Fame snubs and backstage politics, and Lanny made sure no forgiveness was on the menu. He flat out refused WWE's Hall of Fame offers for years, saying, "If Randy said no, I say no. That's loyalty, not convenience." Like a man who turned down a free steak dinner at a vegan convention, Vince could have booked the moon landing live on Raw, and Lanny would still have waved it off with a poem about broken promises. When Randy died in 2011, Vince suddenly remembered the Poffo name, but Lanny smelled the PR smoke from a mile away. Only when Vince agreed to induct the whole Poffo family in 2015 did Lanny finally step back in the ring, figuratively speaking. So yeah, Randy threw Slim Jims and stank-up arenas, Lanny threw shade and sonnets. If wrestling had an Olympic event for Hall of Fame holdouts, Bruno Sammartino would be the Michael Phelps. Gold medals stacked higher than The Rock's eyebrow. Bruno treated WWE's Hall like it was a bad Tinder date he couldn't swipe away for decades. He finally showed up in 2013 after giving Vince enough ghosting to fill a horror movie. Now, Lanny Poffo's Hall of Fame story isn't about dragging his feet for attention. No, this guy was like the family's Hall of Fame bouncer, telling WWE, "You want one Poffo? You get the whole Poffo, no partials, no piecemeal nonsense." For years, Vince tried to slide in the Hall of Fame with just Randy. Lanny shut that down like a bouncer at a nightclub catching VIPs, trying to sneak in their cousin's friend. He refused every solo invite like they were spam emails with no subject line. The dude held the door tight, waiting for Vince to respect Angelo Poffo, the dad, the legend, and Randy's first big fan. That was the price of admission. This wasn't stubbornness, this was family loyalty so fierce it could choke a snake. Lanny wasn't about to let WWE rewrite the Poffo story like it was a bad episode of Family Feud. When WWE finally caved in 2015 and inducted the whole Poffo crew, Lanny stepped up, but not without a side-eye sharper than Ric Flair's robe. He made sure Vince knew this was on Randy's terms, and anyone thinking otherwise could eat the turnbuckle. So Bruno's slow walk was a legend, but Lanny, he was the bouncer who made sure no Poffo got in unless the whole family rolled deep. Slim Jim was the macho man's cash cow. That neon meat stick didn't just ride Randy's coattails, it clung to his tassels like barbecue-flavored Velcro. But when Savage jumped ship to WCW in 1994, he took Slim Jim with him. And that wasn't just a business move. That was a knife in Vince's marketing department. See, Slim Jim wasn't some cute side hustle. It was millions of dollars. Vince had built a whole chunk of WWE's 90s marketing around those commercials. And when the checks stopped coming, Vince allegedly blamed Randy like he'd walked out of Titan Towers carrying a briefcase full of beef jerky money. Lanny Poffo repeated it for years. That Slim Jim deal meant more to Vince than you can imagine. When Randy took it with him, they took it personally. And Slim Jim wasn't dumb, they knew Randy was the brand. When he showed up in WCW, they followed faster than a valet with your keys. The whole thing wasn't just a financial loss, it was a public embarrassment. Vince got outmaneuvered in plain sight. Lanny believed that was the moment Vince wrote Randy off. Not when he left, not when he bashed him, but when he cost Vince that spicy meat money. From then on, Savage was frozen out of WWE. No cameos, no DVDs, not even a Legends deal. The guy went from icon to unperson overnight. Now, Lanny kept telling that story like it was gospel. Vince doesn't forgive beef theft. When you strip it down, this wasn't about commercials. It was about power. And when Randy took that Slim Jim contract with him, he didn't just cut a deal, he bit into Vince's ego and snapped it like a twig. This is the part where Lanny Poffo stopped being the genius and started sounding like he was ready to stab someone with a laminated Hall of Fame plaque. See, Angelo Poffo wasn't just Randy's dad. He was a goddamn war vet, record holder, promoter, and the architect of ICW, a company Vince couldn't buy, so he buried it like a body in Stamford. This man did 6,000 sit-ups in one go, and WWE treated him like he couldn't do 6 push-ups without needing CPR. To Vince McMahon, Angelo was an outlaw, which is wrestling speak for he ran a promotion I didn't control, so let's act like he never existed. They gave Drew Carey a Hall of Fame ring before they even acknowledged Angelo's existence. You hear that? They honored a Price is Right host before they honored the guy who raised Macho Man Randy Savage. That's not disrespect. That's hate mail in a tuxedo. Lanny wasn't having it. He went on every shoot interview like a one-man army, torching bridges that were already on fire. Every time WWE reached out, Lanny told him the same thing. You want Randy in? Then Angelo's going in too. Otherwise, go jump in the Stamford River with a Slim Jim up your nose. And when WWE finally begged him to do the solo induction in 2015, Lanny caved under pressure, but not without dragging the company like they owed him rent. He got on that stage like he was delivering a TED Talk from hell. No tears, no hugging Triple H, just a calculated middle finger hidden inside a tribute speech. He said Angelo on that mic like it was a damn protest chant. Vince probably sat backstage twitching like someone just set fire to a pile of NDAs. Let's be clear, Lanny didn't forgive. He got even in public. And the fans clapped, not for WWE, but because, for once, the truth slipped past their corporate gag order. They put Coco Beware in the Hall of Fame. They also put a lot more who were way more or less deserving into the Hall of Fame. So why not Randy? But Angelo Poffo, still banned like he tried to sell bootleg Hulkamania shirts in Vince's driveway, you don't have to be a genius to do that math. That's not a Hall of Fame. It's a grudge museum. Lanny Poffo wasn't some washed-up nostalgia act begging for crumbs. He was a man on a mission, swinging for ghosts and dragging receipts behind him like chains. He watched WWE disrespect his father, blackball his brother, and then pretend it never happened. And when they came calling, all smiles and suits, Lanny showed up like a man attending his enemy's wedding, just to object. He didn't want applause, he wanted accountability. He didn't crave fame, he craved justice. While every yes man backstage lined up to kiss the ring, Lanny walked in quoting Shakespeare and calling bull like a professor with tenure. Vince gave Hall of Fame rings to talk show hosts and jobber mascots, but Angelo? He couldn't even get mentioned in a legacy video. That's not a mistake. That's malice with a suit and tie. Lanny didn't light a fire to be seen. He lit it to keep his family's name warm in a company that left it out in the cold. And when the final bell rang, Lanny didn't need validation. He already knew the truth. He wasn't there to forgive. He was there to remember what they tried to erase. Rest in peace, genius. You didn't just speak, you scorched. If that lit a fire under your folding chair, hit that like button harder than Lanny hit Vince with the truth. Subscribe for more real deal wrestling beef. No kayfabe, no fluff, just the grudges they tried to hide. This ain't nostalgia, it's a reckoning. Stick around, because the next legend we dig up might have buried more careers than creative ever did. Thanks for watching.